You wouldn't think. You wouldn't think that there's anything involved with having dreadlocks. But there is. You can have bad hair days, good hair days, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, today is Friday Q&A that I said I would come back and do every Friday, even though I'm not doing my weekly tea times. And so, that's got to be exciting. No, I actually slightly missed tea times. They were a big part of my morning routine, right? Because we'd been doing them for, actually, it was like close to 3 months or something like that, 2 months at least. But I think it was close to 3 months, right? Because I started in February, I think, or March. Maybe I started in March, but I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, and so here I am, morning tea time. Make sure to turn my live chat on. Wait for everybody to roll in. It says nobody's here after a minute, which is a real possibility. um, but sometimes the system just lags and doesn't show me people, so I will refrain from feeling devastated for the next little bit until people roll in. Um, Today I'm gonna make some aged moonlight white. Now you don't usually get white teas in an aged variety where they're like in a cake, but I found this one from Yunnan source, or not Yunnan, but from Wu Mountain Teas, and I've been just savoring it. Very crunchy. Good morning, everybody. There's everybody. Hey, hi, how's it going? You're here. I was like, wow, that'd be wild if nobody showed up. So, so yeah, I'm gonna make myself some aged moonlight white. I really enjoyed her the other day. I go off and on. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't, maybe I don't particularly like a flavor of that tea in that moment. And then I try it again and something different, and my body's like, yes, this is the tea that we would like. Morning, everybody. Hey. Um, okay, so I'm gonna get my water going. I'm gonna go at 180 because that's what you normally do for white teas. And then after my tea is ready, we can jump into the Q&A. But I know a bunch of people are curious about things, because the truth is my tea time's almost turned into like a live recorded vlog of things that I've been up to. So I've got all of the peppers and the eggplants and the tomatillos planted in the garden. I've got all of my greens in. I've got even some melons and stuff like that planted. I did end up having to direct seed a bunch of like squash and stuff, but that's better than not planting them. Today, after the live, we will be getting the tomatoes planted. And I'm glad I waited because it's been a little windy, a little gusty. The peppers handled it because they were smaller, but like I think the tomatoes would have got beaten up. And the writing has been going decent. Really, I've been focusing on the format. Like, I do this thing when I write where I write out the format. Like, this needs to be this section, this section, this section, this section, this section, this section, or whatever. And then it's like a formula, right? And then I go through and I just fill it all out, right? And so I've been bouncing back and forth between pushing to get all the garden done, so that's like off of my mind. There's a little hair, they're driving me crazy. And then I've been getting the format for the writing ready, and I've been doing lots of things with milk and doing all those kinds of things. But yeah, so things have been going good. I will say my mornings are a little less structured without the tea times, and I do not know yet how I feel about that. Right, because over the past 2 months, it's really helped me just have like a structure of like when I need to be ready by, and I'm getting up by, and I'm going to bed by. And now I feel like I'm kind of vaguely like a kid that just got like summer vacation, where I'm like, oh, what time is it? I slept until when? Right? And so I'm not sure how to feel about it. But it is a needed break. I am catching up on a lot of things that require like right about now, I'd be outside doing garden stuff before it got really hot. Right? Because here it's like, you gotta do it. You gotta do it early because I'm in high mountain desert. Um, and remember, like all of my other tea times, I do, or like all my other Friday Q&A tea times, I don't start answering health questions until I've had my first cup of tea and I'm waiting on the water's just about to beep, and then you got another 3 minute wait. but uh, but yeah, things have been going good. Today, I also plan on recording a video about black locust. I don't know if I'll get it posted today, but I will definitely have it posted by tomorrow. And just kind of, going from there. But I do feel like the garden has taken a bunch of my attention in the past week or so. But that's okay. I'm telling myself, I have time. I am doing a little bit of both. It's alright. And like, I don't want the break that I'm taking from my everyday tea times to be just, I need a break so I can do laundry. Like that concept of like, I need a break so I can like work myself to bone in the background. So I'm trying pretty hard not to do that. Um, but yeah, so I'm excited to have tea with you guys. I usually am having I don't know. I haven't fallen back into the rhythm of like tea in the morning with my husband either. And like that's okay. He's usually pretty frantic about getting stuff done outside and I don't, yeah, it just hasn't happened. So I sit here all by myself and have tea and record my little short for Instagram. But, you know, that's okay too. And maybe winter is more of a time where we're like able to do that. Um, but but yeah, so remember when this timer's up and I have my first glass of tea, then I will jump into like the herbal Q&A thing. But I know a lot of people want updates. Oh, I finally got my wine fridge that I'll be using for a cheese cave. I'm excited for that. And I've got some sherv aging on the counter like in its way. I'm waiting for like the white rind bloom to happen on the top, and then I'm gonna turn it into little aged like miniature, basically like a brie cheese. And I'm excited about that. I really am. I've been pretty much living off of like milk kefir and also like water kefir and El Ruderai and everything else. We did get those rabbits I was talking about. I think I was discussing it. I don't know if we did that while I was still doing the live Q&A. I don't recall. But we have a little colony built out. It'll be a while. Honestly, it'll be probably till next year until things are really humming along with bunnies. But having them is just nice. Um, yeah, I don't know. So I think in going forward, when I come back for tea times, oh, I also forgot that I said I would do these later in the afternoon, and I just remembered. That's okay. And I remember because I think when I come back, it might be afternoon tea versus morning tea. I'm trying to figure out how to do that. It might be like every Tuesday and Friday, right? Like Tuesdays, like Tuesday tea time, Friday Q&A, kind of things like that. So, all right. Tea is ready. She smells nice. Yeah, I am. My life is just milk. My life is just milk and garden and like looking at like a page to write stuff on, right? Question. How's the puppy? Lula is doing good. She's probably about up to here already, like height wise. She's a goofy girl, but she's doing really well. At some point, I'll have her in some of my videos, like my outside videos. Right now, if she came back here, I have to get rid of this little greenhouse that I built because I'm done using it. But there's not enough space. She'd knock everything down like a bull in a china shop. Let's see. Question. I was diagnosed with eosinophilic asthma. I had been experimenting with essential oils with sniffers. Do you think it's related? I know better now. It's absolutely related. There's a whole chapter in my book, Essentially Deadly, The Unspoken Dangers of Essential Oils. where I go over like the impacts on respiratory stuff. And she definitely has the capacity to cause severe damage to your lung capillaries, which is also why you can't like have her around like birds or certain pets. You can't have essential oils around stuff like that. Um, but you could start working with stuff like comfrey infusion. You could work with like the tiger's milk mushroom mullein infusion and see if you can do a little bit of healing. It might not ever go away, but you might be able to just regenerate some of that dead cell tissue that's happening. Um, Question: self heal. Do I use the flowers and the leaves? Yeah, I use all above ground parts. So I just snip her. I use the stem, the leaf, the bloom. You know, I don't dig up the root because then she won't come back next year. Question: what herbs do you recommend for balancing hormones while on birth control? You can't. You can't, because the point of birth control is that you are like hugely increasing your estrogen levels typically, right? It's like preventing you from being able to get pregnant by having like an imbalanced level of hormones. So there's nothing that you could do to counteract it, and even if you did, it would then make the birth control ineffective. um Question: what do you do for swelling in a testicle after a year after inguinal hernia surgery? Husband says it's not painful. He's had it checked out and they weren't helpful. It depends on what's causing the swelling, and I can't believe that they weren't helpful. He might want to get like a second opinion, because what if it could be fluid, right? It could be fluid buildup, and if it's fluid buildup, you might use something like cleavers, something that's going to help get like your system like up and running and like pushing that excess water into your kidneys, right? Like a diuretic. But if it's tissue damage, then you'd have to do something like chickweed infused water. Like he needs to like dip his balls in a bowl of tea. Right, but like not knowing what the swelling is, and I don't like that they just didn't pay attention. So he might want to get a second opinion, even though it's not painful. It could be something that down the line causes big problems, and without knowing why it's swelling, we'd kind of be swinging in the dark, right? Um, so, question: nephew diagnosed with stomach cancer stage 4. Any suggestions? Unfortunately, we'll do Western medicine and what can support his immune system. That's rough. He could probably take turkey tail mushroom alongside of most people do. It's even one of those things that's been used long enough with in TCM and places like that, that most Western doctors, they won't like say that it'll do anything, but they'll be like, yeah, you can take turkey tail mushroom alongside of it. I'd also look into LDN, which is actually Western medicine, low dose naproxen. It's been shown to like deal with cancer. It's wild. It's wild and it's cheap. He has to get a prescription for it. Typically in the low dose they're saying it's for pain management, but it also like really helps your immune system and everything like that. So it might be something to look into. Okay, so just got here. Question: what about iodine? Shin to see a iodine deficiency. I'm concerned for my 11-year-old thyroid. Help me. What iodine? Not Bactine. Okay, so from deciphering that, I think you're saying that your 11-year-old has iodine deficiency. Well, you could get some like Nansen iodine. Anything that's not meant just to clean wounds, but it's actually iodine, and you put a patch on your arm. And honestly, if it disappears or severely lightens before like 13 hours, you have a bad iodine deficiency. Most humans do, because there's not enough iodine in the food we eat, and it doesn't even matter if you're using table salt, it's not enough iodine. And then there's bromide in all of our food, anything that's a dough, regardless if it's gluten free or not, because it's a dough conditioner. And bromide completely like goes in the same receptors and blocks out iodine, right? So your thyroid is full of iodine. You could work with small doses of iodine. You could check out my seaweed infusion video. You could up your seafood content. You could look into the iodine protocol, right? If you're really worried about it with like a younger kid, you could ask your doctor to do an iodine wasting test. That's where you take a bunch of iodine, right? And then you pee. And if there's not very much iodine in your pee that they check, then they know that you're iodine deficient because your body's not letting go of it. Like if you had enough iodine in your body, you would have a lot of iodine in your urine, right? So that's how they test for iodine beyond putting it on your skin. So that's what I would do. Somebody said there's a show on Netflix about essential oils. April's book is way better, but the show is called I think Unwell and talks about the bogus industry that is essential oils. Yeah, that show mainly focused on the industry, right? And they did touch a little bit on the dangers of it, but yeah, I that book is wild. I'm like, I wrote it, but it's like, fuck. Like, there are babies, like animal babies, being born without eyes, people. Like, it's crazy. And everyone's like, oh, that's just your opinion. I'm like, no, these are studies. My whole book is based on, like, studies. Like, I'm not just talking about opinions. Like, every single chapter of the book, I am breaking down studies. And did you know, for all the people that will inevitably at me and say, oh, well, what about all these studies that say they're amazing? Did you know that almost all studies on the benefits of essential oils are backed and paid for by the top 3 essential oil companies through John Hopkins? So every time you're like, wow, they say this essential oil really helps me, if you dig far enough, they've been sponsored to say that. Right, like it's been paid for by the company that's selling them to you, and that's a huge deal. Question. Same thyroid question. I may have missed it, but what was the reason for all that milk drinking and other kefir stuff? um, well, I have milk goats, and this time of year, it's like you're flush with milk because they've just had their babies not too long ago, usually in like February, March, and now the pastures are all green, and so it's like you get gallons of milk a day, and now it's a use it or lose it, preserve it or don't have it. But milk kefir, homemade milk kefir, the stuff from the store is fake. It's not even milk kefir. It's basically like a weekly cultured yogurt that has chemicals added to it to prevent the bacterial growth that you actually want, right? So when you make homemade milk kefir, there are like over 80 individual different types of beneficial yeasts and bacteria and like really amazing stuff for your health. I have a big old video on milk kefir if you'd like to go watch how to make it, the benefits of it. She's really amazing. Like if you have digestive health issues, if you have mental health issues, if you have skin issues, livers, there's not really anything that milk kefir can't support you through. And she's considered a psychobiotic. Not like she's gonna crazy and can beat you up, but like basically she has the capacity, like some beneficial bacteria, to improve your mental health. There's all these studies coming about it. It's pretty crazy. Question. I have 2.5 gallons of water kefir jars going. One are grains from an Etsy store and one from a friend. Can I mix the grains together so I'm not making so much every week? Yeah, you can for sure. So when I got back into milk kefir this spring, and I've been doing both milk kefir and water kefir on and on for like a decade. One thing that I did was I got these grains that were adapted to goat milk, right? Because they have to like acclimate to the type of dairy you're using. And then I got these other grains that weren't necessarily adapted to goat milk, but they had like a larger grain structure, right? And so slowly what I did is I started swapping grains. I put one grain from you in there and one grain from you in there, and then eventually I put them all together, and now I get these huge like huge grains like this size, and I'm growing them up that way. With the water kefir, what I would do is you can also like combine them slowly like that, or do a jar that's half and half so they get acclimated to each other, right? Because they might slow down a little bit as they're like getting to know each other and working it out. But also you could freeze, like you could take the water kefir grains, the excess that you have from each, right? And you could lay them out, give them a rinse under, some water, lay them out on a paper towel just for a few hours so they like surface dry, and then freeze them, right? That way you have backup grains in case they don't get along really well, but it shouldn't be a problem, right? I've got about a gallon and a half going right now. It gets out of control. It really does. Thank you so much for the super Reina. Her question is let me see. See, my lower intestines are working so slow, sensitive to the touch, very bloated, not constipated, but not flowing well. Any ideas? Well, if you can handle dairy, definitely start drinking the milk kefir. That's the one thing that she's known for, is like repairing digestive issues. Um, so you could also start working with really low dosed aged cascara bark. I've talked about her a couple times before. She is a nice laxative, but you want to use just small amounts to keep yourself regular. If you take a huge amount of cascara bark, you will shit your brains out for sure. But a little bit won't hurt, and it'll keep you regular. It sounds like you might have a little bit of some dysbiosis going on, like you're like things are inflamed in your lower intestine. So and if you can't drink dairy, water kefir would be your next best bet. She doesn't have as many beneficial bacteria, but there are still a lot of beneficial bacteria, and it's dairy free. So you could start like pushing back against some of that bacteria and those endotoxins that are happening. But cascara bark is always pretty good for getting things moving down there. Okay, let's see. Let me jump down here. Question: where should I get the cascara? I like Oregon Harvest just because they actually advertise that it's aged cascara bark. If your cascara bark is too fresh, it will cause horrendous stomach cramps. It needs to be aged. Um, so can I? Sure. Happy birthday, Eileen Iluch. Maybe I said that right. Somebody said, "Can you wish my mom a happy birthday?" But then my admin wiped it. But you snuck in there, right? Okay, so let me. It goes so fast. If I don't scroll up, I can't see the questions. Question: I made an ACV, which is apple cider vinegar and rosemary tincture. How long should it last? So that's not a tincture. That is an infused vinegar, unless you mean you added alcohol to your rosemary and like infused vinegar. But a vinegar will last about 6 months to a year is when it's like best to use for like its medicinal properties. After that, it's not necessarily bad, especially if you've removed the rosemary. It's just that the properties start to dissipate a little bit, right? So like in the beginning, it's more like something medicinal that you would use internally on purpose, and towards the end, it's more like we can cook with this, right? Because we're not worried about like cooking off or hurting any of the medicinal properties because they've already weaned. Okay, question. I have a UTI with a bacteria of, I'm not going to say that right, Enterococcus facialis. Maybe I did. What can I use with the antibiotics they gave me? Um, it's a lot of yogurt. I would say milk kefir, but it's going to take you time to make that, right? But you would want to be eating like a lot of like different types of yogurt. Like look at the back of the label and see the different bacterias that are there, because what's going to happen is that you're going to use antibiotic to wipe out that bacteria, but then like all of your good bacteria is wiped out, so you have a huge, like, you're more prone now to getting another infection, right? Because it takes time for good bacteria to recolonize, but bad bacteria, boom, they grow fast, right? And that's the issue with antibiotics. It's not that they're horrendous and that we shouldn't use them to wipe out bacteria. It's that they don't differentiate, and that good bacteria are actually more susceptible to antibiotics than bad bacteria, right? And so making sure that we're taking in all the fermented foods of different varieties while we're on antibiotics, but also like continuing after, all that type of stuff would prevent us from getting the UTI in the first place, because the bacteria that's bad has a harder time getting a foothold when we have a good bacteria count, right? Remember, you are 4 pounds of bacteria. 4 pounds of your body weight is living organisms inside of you that you need to stay alive. However, if your gut's really unhealthy and you're eating hyper processed foods and chlorinated water, what happens is that 4 pounds of bacteria can turn into 4 pounds of like unhelpful bad bacteria, and you get SIBO or SIFO or chronic infections and things like that, because it's not the good guys helping you defend off the bad guys, right? So if we start shifting that, if we start making sure that 4 pounds of bacteria in us is like for the good, we're far less likely to get sick and all kinds of things like that. We get less cancer, less dementia. There's even these studies that are, well, they're hard to study, but they're finding that when they examine the brains of patients with Alzheimer's after they've died, obviously, they have candida growth all through their brain, which is a yeast. And people are like, okay, well, it's not really a bad yeast, but yeast is opportunistic. It only overgrows when there's something that needs to be filled, because all the other good bacteria has died off. The candida can just spread. Right? You need that particular yeast in your body. You just don't need it all over. Right? And the same thing can go for bad bacteria or any type of thing like that. Okay, so question: where do you get most of your medical info? Do you have any specific medical books or sites you recommend that aren't inundated with bogus studies? No. I am hyper curious. It's what I do. Like, and a lot of it, I'm like learning about myself, my own illnesses, my family's illnesses, and it's actually a problem. I have to put like timers on my phone and like block certain stuff at certain times of day, because I will just like incessantly research, because it makes my brain happy, but it kills my physical body. And so just lots of reading and curiosity. Of course, I'm always looking at like PubMed, ResearchGate, Science Direct, all these types of journals. But ultimately, I'm always looking at like who is funding the study, especially. But when you're looking at diseases in particular, or certain bacteria or anything, like if you're not studying, let's say, about something an essential oil can do, and you're just looking at like research, like about a particular situation that somebody's facing, that stuff usually isn't biased, because they're just researching for research's sake. Right? They're not researching a drug or a compound. They're just looking into the mechanisms of why. And that question there, why, is how you get as much stuff in your brain that I have. Why? Why does it do that? Like, I also really suggest, if anybody's really, really interested in deep diving into their health, looking at like your genomes, like looking into your DNA, and like working with somewhere in the beginning, like self decode is a good place for beginners, because it gives you like all these hints and tips. It's like, hey, you have, these genetic SNPs, and maybe that means you need more of this vitamin, or you're more prone to high cholesterol or heart issues, or this or this or that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have those things, right? It takes usually like thousands of SNPs before you actually have a thing versus just one, right? But it's a good place to start, because then you can look for research. Like for me, okay, so I'm gonna just dump this out of my brain, and I've talked about it before, but like, okay, so I was like, fuck, I'm really low in vitamin A, which is wild, because I like eat a lot of vitamin A. But I started digging into like my culture from my father's side, which is Irish traveler, and I'm like, wow, what do they have to do with like vitamin A? Like, what happens? I'm like, oh, well, they have found that in our culture that we have these particular gene mutations that will prevent us from converting beta carotene into retinol. And so I take that and I look in their little study, and it said like it had like 10 different SNPs, and I go to look at my SNPs, because I've uploaded my like ancestry data pack to like these websites that look at like your SNPs, so you can actually dig into the data. And I'm like, huh, I have all 9. There was one that I didn't have, but I had 9 out of 10, right? And then I'm like, okay, on a blood test, I have almost no vitamin A in my body. Holy shit, right? And then the same thing for the vitamin K, and like all these like, I'm a carrier for galactonemia. Like and so like you can really start digging into your health by digging into your DNA, and it doesn't always mean that you'll have it, but like there are things that like I don't have that my grandchildren might, or that like if I had another kid they could have, right? And it's just something to be aware of. And you can take any DNA test that you've done for like your ancestry, and you can upload it to like self decode. Another one is sequencing.com. They're more in depth. I do like them though, because they tell you like if you're a carrier, or if this is just a risk or whatever. But they'll try to upsell you on their full genome sequencing, and it's like $500. It's wild. But for $40, you can upload the 1% data that you have from like any ancestry test that you've done. So that's a good place to start. So Oh my goodness. Question. My HTMA showed low levels of all minerals except for manganese. Do you think this would indicate toxic levels of manganese? Yeah, you know, it could. Manganese, like I have to, I'll ask you. I won't be able to see it because I've got, basically I scroll up and it stops the comments from moving and then I slowly scroll down the questions. So I might not see what you say afterwards, but like if you are smoking weed or a dab pen or any type of pen, regardless if it's tobacco or otherwise, you will probably have elevated manganese levels, especially the pens. Manganese madness is definitely a thing. It can make you have mental health issues and things like that. Um, but really low levels of all other minerals across the board and not low manganese tells me that you're getting exposed to manganese from somewhere, right? Because it's not like it's a common mineral that we encounter, but it is something that they use a lot in the fucking coil elements of anything that you're smoking that isn't real. Right, but also there's usually high levels of manganese in weed these days too because of all the synthetic fertilizers they use. Um, but I would kind of look around for where you might be potentially getting exposed from. If you have well water, get that tested. Sometimes the old well casings can have manganese in them, but so I would start looking into like deeply remineralizing your body, right? And that would definitely offset the manganese, right? Because we need manganese, we do. It's a crucial element, but like we don't need that much, right? It's super tiny amounts that we require. There's never really a need to supplement it because it's such a microscopic amount. Um, okay, so question, where should I get the cascara? I like the Oregon Harvest brand. Um, question, where would be a good place to order dry herbs from? I get asked this question a lot. I don't have like a specific fealty, loyalty, whatever. I don't have a specific company that I like. Usually I'm checking places like Mountain Rose Herbs, Frontier, Star West, San Francisco Herb Co. is a good one. I shop around and don't be afraid to ask them for a COA, Certificate of Analysis. So you can see how old the herb is they have, if it was sprayed or chemical or gas treated when they imported it, because most of them will be importing everything because a vast majority of herbs are grown in Eastern Europe. And there's nothing wrong with it being grown there. They have like really pristine areas to grow in, but the USDA requires some form of treatment when you're bringing in agricultural products like that. Some places they'll use steam, other places use chemicals and gases and things like that that are nasty. And if you get a COA, it'll tell you how it's been treated when it comes in through the country. But it can also tell you the country of origin, how old it is. Like it can tell you all kinds of information, and you don't have to be like making and selling things to request that. They legally have to have a COA. Like you can ask me for a COA for like my Shilajit bee pollen, and I have it, right? Because we're selling something that's like a supplement. Um, and so don't be afraid to ask for that type of stuff, and shop around. The truth is a lot of them are buying from the same place. Right, they go and they buy from these farmers in these different countries, and like their rose petals are from the same place their rose petals are, but these people might charge $5 more per pound because their name is Mountain Rose Herbs. Right, so shop around, and when you get a COA, you can compare them too. You can be like, oh, that's from the same place. Okay, so question. I can't really. Pituitary gland heavy rates to thyroid, adrenal bad, and hormones. I can't really decipher it. I know that you're talking about a pituitary gland. I don't know. Are you saying that your pituitary gland has a higher rate than your thyroid? I can't decipher it. I'm sorry. Okay. So, question, please repeat about where to get cascara bark. Oregon Harvest. Okay. So, question, what would help with hyperthyroid? Hyperthyroid, you could start working with things like motherwort on a regular basis in larger doses, lemon balm. Pretty much any of the mints are going to downregulate your thyroid if you use them like consistently every day. Um, and as weird as this sounds, I would also look into the link between low iodine and hyperthyroid. A lot of people will be like, no, it'll make your thyroid go faster, but sometimes like your body just swings the other way when you're iodine deficient and it goes too fast, right? And so you might do an iodine test and see if you're really low in that. But then instead of supplementing iodine, you could like very slowly work with seaweeds, right? Like small amounts. You might only like be able to use like a tablespoon a day for like a month, and then you might be able to go up to like 1/4 cup, right? Like you just want to slowly work on rebuilding your levels. If you're hyperthyroid, what happens is people are like, oh, and they take a shit ton of something, and they're like, oh, I felt bad, it was bad for me, and I'm like, no, you just have to like work your way into it sometimes. Okay. So somebody said, thank you, April. I made a tincture because of you, and it turned out amazing. I'm really glad to hear that. They're really easy to do. Tinctures are so easy to make. They are. Somebody said, have you ever heard of Himalayan mountain grass? I can't find any info on it. I just bought some and I'm very curious. I have not heard about it, but what you can do is find the Latin name and Google that. Just do the Latin name in parentheses and then medicinal use in parentheses. And then if anything's on the internet, it'll pop up and it'll get you past the basic search engine stuff because you're giving Google a specific command. Okay, question. I didn't have quite enough vodka to top off my corn silk tincture. Is it ruined? No, it might oxidize a little bit, you know, make sure that all the plant matter is underneath of the vodka. And if you can find a smaller jar, don't be afraid to swap it out. Or in the future, like if it's not too long from now, you can grab some more vodka and just top it off. Okay, so let's see. Question: what would you suggest to help me wean off Ozempic, which I take for diabetes? You just have to stop. That's what my dad did. I kept telling him, I was like, this shit is killing you, Dad. You're just, he's like, oh, I'm like, you can't stop going to the bathroom because of the fucking medication. Right. Like, of course your blood sugar is going to be lower when, like, when you're not eating and you're, like, shitting your brains out, you know? But as far as I know, and I could be wrong because it hasn't been out that long, I don't believe there's a weaning protocol. Like, I don't believe you have to step down off of it. I think you can just stop. Um, at least my dad did, and he instantly felt better within like a day or so. He's like, oh yeah, it was that. I'm like, I told you, people are getting sued. Well, not people, but they're getting sued because they're like causing people to have like chronic lifelong diarrhea and paralyzed stomachs and things like that. You know, it's wild. um, you know, and so I don't think there's any protocol to stopping it beyond just stopping it. You might be thinking of like, what can I use instead? But a lot of that's just learning about like how the metabolism functions and like remineralizing your body and like supporting your thyroid health. Like ultimately, for anybody who's trying to control type 2 diabetes or lose weight or anything like that, it comes down to your metabolism and getting the rancid seed oils out of your diet. Right. Like that's a good place to start. Like the canola oils, the safflower, the sunflower, the grapeseed. Basically, if it's not coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, or like tallow or butter, real things, it's fucking killing you because it's rancid seed oil and oxidizes inside of your body and it blocks the Randle cycle, which is where like your body shuttles glucose into your cells with insulin, and it blocks that. It's like an oily coating that does not let the glucose go into your cells, and then you have insulin resistance. You know, it's a whole thing. Okay, so question: will you do more fermentation lessons? Yeah, I'll probably have some more on those as I'm doing it. Right, like the thing is, I'm just kind of like showing you my life on any given basis. Like I have to be doing something. I'm like, oh, turn the camera on. So as I get more veggies in the garden, I'll probably talk about fermenting things like that when it's like popping up, and maybe I'll do a cheese video and just be all over the place. I thought about doing like this thing where I see people like it's usually housewives, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm like a weird hybrid of like I'm a housewife because I'm stay at home, but I'm also like the full-time like earner because I run the business, right? So it's weird. But I see people set up like cameras in their kitchen and then they like record what they're doing and then they voice over. And I've thought about, I know there's a million of those, but there's not really one for people who like practice herbalism, right? Like, and so I thought about maybe doing videos like that now and then. I don't think that's all I would ever do, but like it'd be interesting, you know, because I know a lot of people want to see what I'm up to. But it'd be kind of cool to just be doing the things and not having to like necessarily stop and instruct, or be like, I could in the voiceover be like, I already have a video how to do this, I'll link it, right? You know, but just so people can watch like what I'm doing now and then, you know. Question: dairy is all good. Should I have the kefir or cascara for my intestines? What would you do? I would instantly start tracking down some milk kefir grains and start getting that going. And you could also work with low dose cascara bark, right? You wouldn't need it forever, but like some people, and this is the ironic thing, some people at first when they're drinking milk kefir might end up with a little bit of constipation because you're killing off bad bacteria, and that endotoxin load can make things bind up. So having a cascara bark on hand is handy, but your body will regulate through it eventually. Like once it's killed off that bad bacteria, you'll just go to the bathroom like a champ. And you'll have like ghost wipes where like there's nothing on your toilet paper, and it's not because you're constipated, right? It'll just be effortless. But there could be an adaptation process. So I would get started on the milk kefir, making it right, but I would also have a little bit of cascara bark on hand. Question: will dehydrated reishi lose its medicinal qualities over time like dehydrated herbs? Yeah, but the thing about reishi is it's a polypore mushroom, so it's like wood. Right, they have to use like saws to cut them once they're dried, and arguably they're very hard to cut when they're fresh too. So because it's that hard, it really holds on to its properties. And if you have it like vacuum sealed, popped in your freezer, it'll be good for like 5 years. You know, you've got a long time, and even after that, I would still use it. It just might not be as strong. Okay, so somebody said actually candida grows even after you die. It's a mushroom that grows in your body after death. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's not supposed to be there. Right, and it doesn't mean that, because they're looking at brains that don't have candida in their brain, and you got to understand that when they are like looking at like a patient that has died, their Alzheimer's brain, they're not leaving that body there long enough for the decomposition to start. So it wasn't like from the time they died to the time they took their brain out that candida spread from the gut to the brain. Right. We know that it can spread. We know that it can lodge in your nose. We know that it can spread everywhere. But it's only doing that in the living because we don't have enough good bacteria. And when they're using bodies for science, they usually chop you up like within like 24 to 48 hours of dying, and the yeast won't be able to spread that quickly, especially because they're comparing it to brains that don't have Alzheimer's or dementia, and they don't have candida growth in their brain, right? And so if it was just that way across the board, all bodies would have it. Right, it wouldn't be of any interest. It would just be something that they knew happened when we died, right? Okay, so let me question. I don't know what that word is. sometimes, like sometimes I'll know like the diagnosis, right? But sometimes it's like if you tell a person what your symptoms are, especially when you're dealing with like somebody who practices herbalism or things like that, the name of the disease isn't necessarily as important as the symptoms, because ultimately what we're trying to help is the symptoms, right? They just gave it a name. Right? And so sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what that is unless I look it up, because there's so many things out there. So question: hey April, do you have any thoughts on eating aloe vera leaf for health benefits? I mean, people have been doing it for a long time. I'd rather have you eat the leaf than drink the hyper processed juices that they sell, right? I do know that it's important that you bleed it, right? You have to get like the saponins out of it, I believe is what it is. Like when you cut the tip of it and you let it strain, at first what comes out will be yellow, right? And you need to let all that yellow come out. You have like stand it like upright in a dish, right? Like a little cup or something, right? And let that all drain out so there's none of that left. And then you split it open, and then people eat the inside. Usually it's for like healing digestive health issues, definitely a natural laxative, things like that. Okay, let me jump way down here. Question: where can I get She Legit that is good? I sell She Legit. I have good She Legit. I'm gonna do a shameless advertisement. So I have my Shilajit and bee pollen synergism capsules. All Shilajit comes from the Himalayas. It's from the Himalayan mountains. There are different countries that it can come from. I choose to work with India because they have the strictest like harvesting sustainability regulations. But because I do get mine from India, I pesticide test because they tend to use pesticides over there, but they never spray it on Shilajit because it's like not a living thing. It's resin, right? But also I've noticed that theirs is far less likely to be like adulterated, like cut with something, right? And of course, we have all the COAs, we do all the testing on our Shilajit. And then I combine it with bee pollen because when we're supporting like our fulvic acid levels and our metabolism, we really need to have B vitamins in there, and bee pollen is full of B vitamins. So this is my Shilajit and bee pollen synergism capsules. They're fantastic for anybody who's exhausted, dealing with low iron levels, low metabolism, just tired all the time. She's got tons of reviews, so you don't have to take my word for it. You can see how people are experiencing her. And it's just one capsule a day because I work with microdose, because people often overdo Shilajit. They'll take a huge amount, they'll feel all jittery and fucked up, and then they're like, oh, I don't want to take that anymore. And I'm like, well, you have to go really slow when you're remineralizing your body. And Shilajit is packed full of minerals because basically all these plants that have been growing in the Himalayas, they slowly die. And then what happens is, because the ground isn't porous in the cracks of the mountain, like it accumulates and it turns into a resin over hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's just loaded with all of the nutrients and minerals that were in the plants, right? Shilajit is amazing stuff, but a little will do you. So it's one capsule a day, and every bottle lasts 2 months. Most herbal places, they'll have you taking 5, 6, 7 capsules at a time. You have this huge bottle, and it's like, this was only going to last me 2 weeks. But I work with the belief of microdosing herbs. I do feel like at this point in my life that a little bit goes further than a lot, because your body's not having to like fight off all the extra compounds. It can focus on using them versus filtering them out, right? And you don't even have to believe my word for it. Again, there are tons of reviews. So this is my Shilajit bee pollen. You'll be able to follow the link in my bio or go directly to sheisofthewoods.org, and I'll have a thing pinned in the comment section once this posts. But yeah, so it's been about 46 minutes. Thank you for letting me end this with a shameless advertisement, and I'm just going to keep rolling with it. So if you if you would like to support my capacity to teach freely, to dump out my brain, to just be a human and be here with you, consider becoming a member. It's just a way to throw me a couple bucks a month. You could also call something home from my apothecary, like I talked about with my Shilajit bee pollen capsules, but I have synergism capsules for just about everything. So if you don't need an energy boost, but you need support with your hormones or memory or just anything like that, I've probably got a blend for you. And you can use the one-time code TEATIME, TEATIME, to save 10% off of anything that you would like to call home from the shop. If you can't become a member or call something home from the apothecary, make sure, or even if you can, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is super important because it helps other people realize that they are smart enough to do this too, that they can take their health back into their own hands. It gets my work out there. It is really, really helpful. So usually I say it, see you next Monday, but because I'm taking a break, I will see everybody next Friday. Oh, and if I didn't answer your question, don't worry. I have literally probably at this point hundreds of hours, a lot of hours of these Q&As, so you can probably dig through. Some of them are 3 hours long, and find like your question answered or something adjacent to your question that helps you out. So thank you so much for watching, folks, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye.